trip out. But a trip out to where? I don't know. As I'm driving along out of Market Warsop, I've got two sites I could possibly trap at that I've narrowed it down to. Just had a shower of rain, but I'm hopeful that that might be the last rain that we have. So, as I approach this junction, it's time to make my mind up as to which way I go. I've not quite got the hang of the timing yet, now that the nights are drawing in. 31st of August this evening, and as you can see from behind me, I'm in a woodland setting. This was one of the choices that I had, the two choices. And this is Treswell Wood. This is a Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust Reserve. Visited with Dillis here a number of times during the day, but never had the opportunity to trap moths here, and hopefully we may well get quite a few. I also think that with it being a woodland setting, I will need a second catch cup for the hornets, because I'm invariably going to be bothered by hornets. Hopefully this isn't going to be one of those sessions where you set up, switch the light on and get completely bombarded by hornets because there's a nest in close proximity. We shall find out. Well, we're off and running. First time trapping here at Treswell Wood. Probably not too much in the way of different species, but we shall see what we get. See what turns up. It's always nice to trap somewhere for the first time. Seems strange though, going somewhere that you don't know, and you have a sort of wariness about a site. This one should be safe enough. The nearest properties are both posh farms. But the first moths are in. We've got two orange swifts already, which is no surprise because swifts start to fly pretty much at dusk, and so if you're out and about anywhere trapping in some rural location, some species of swift is usually the first moth in. But we have two in, and so it'll be nice to see what turns up tonight. Probably be a very similar range of species to what I had at Miss and Carr a few nights ago, and tonight is brilliant weather-wise. A bit of rain is forecasted potentially in the early hours, but whether I'm still here in the early hours or not, I don't know. Be nice to get something unusual, something that I haven't caught before. Maybe that could come in the form of a micro moth, but we shall see what turns up. It's the perfect evening, the last evening of August 2024, September tomorrow. What will September bring in terms of moths to Nottinghamshire, and especially to my light? Hopefully we'll get a favourable September for moth trapping. Decent nights, decent temperatures, some nice moths available too, and some more beautiful settings like this. As you can hear, I have company in the form of a muntjac, which has been calling incessantly like that for several minutes now. But my start to the moth trapping here at Treswell Wood hasn't gone by without its little mishaps. The big mishap is the fact that I've dropped my flask, not from a great height, and it was in the bag, just put it on the floor a little bit too heavy. Crunch! So no tea for the rest of this trapping session, or indeed on the way home. The other, I wouldn't say mishap, but problematic situation is the fact that I'm fast approaching double figure counts of hornets, so I probably won't be spending a lot of time very close to the light, but I'll watch from a safe distance and monitor any hornets that come in. There's obviously a nest close by, and you don't want to be stung by hornets. You don't want to be stung by anything. So I respect hornets, as I've said before, and I will watch the light from a safe distance when they come in, but I am potting them up, so they shouldn't present too much of a problem. Can be a problem packing up if you don't pot them up and you've got them all over the place. That's especially entertaining. Well, as you can probably tell, not the most active of sheets at the moment. About 3/4 of an hour into the session, and there's almost been as many hornets as moths. Good job I've got plenty of pots, but they're all tucked up safely in the boot of the car. But in terms of insects in general, there's very little flying around. But by now the sky is virtually properly dark. It's just about 9:15, so this is the time really when more moths should start to come in, now that they've had a chance to feed up a little bit and they've really started flying. But at the moment there's not a lot that I could really show you, and certainly nothing that you haven't seen before. But it's still early days. But at least one thing, you'll be able to see a fabulous collection of hornets if I've got no moths to show you by the end of this session. It's alright, it's a moth in a pot, and usually when I have a moth in a pot, it's a good moth. This is an interesting one. It's a very common species, but this is a third brood engrailed, which is in here. Engrailed fly early in the year, then they have a second brood sort of midsummer. But I didn't expect one of these. I thought it was a willow beauty when it first dropped in. So that's an unexpected one, but a common species. But I'll just go through the rest of the moths that I've had. I've not had many, so you may well be looking at a few photos, and I certainly haven't filmed any because there's been none to film. 2 orange swift that mentioned at the start of the trapping session. Now had 5 brimstone, 4 green carpet, a single square spot rustic, and I'm sure that will change and more of those will come in. Single lesser broad bordered yellow underwing, absolutely beautiful moth and usually immensely common, but I've only had a handful this year. Don't know what's happened to all of the yellow underwings. There's a single straw dot knocking about. 2 centre-barred sallow. Now centre-barred sallows are the first of the colourful range of sallow moths that fly from September onwards. Absolutely beautiful, and if any moths are perhaps indicative of encouraging people into the hobby, it could be any of the sallow species that we have here in the UK. They are absolutely beautiful moths, quite appropriate for their coloration, that they fly predominantly when the leaves on the trees are various shades of browns, yellows and oranges. So 2 centre-barred sallows in. Single flame shoulder and a common wainscot make up the routine fare that we have, and on the micro front, just 4 species, nothing particularly unusual, although it's quite a late side ear Splendana. I haven't had one for a while actually. You get lots of those in Sherwood Forest, and it seems to be quite a late one to me, but an absolute beauty of a Tortrix moth. I'll put a photo in if I haven't done already, because they really are absolutely splendid, hence the name Splendana. Whether there's any connection in that or not, I don't know, but it's a splendid micro moth nonetheless. And that's it. Not much, but I'll say a few more moths starting to appear now, and the hornet count, we're well into double figures. Haven't had one for about 10 minutes now, so there's another one due, probably from over there somewhere. Well, here's one of the centre-barred sallows which has settled down. This one seems a very dark individual. Normally the ground colour to the forewings is a little bit lighter than that, but you can see what an attractive moth this is. Quite easy to identify. Some of the various species of sallows can be quite similar, so you have to take care with some, but centre-barred sallow you usually find that darker bar across the wings there, and 2 dark kidney marks tucked away within that bar. A very attractive moth. Thankfully this one has settled down nicely. So this is a species that you will trap in a suburban or urban moth trap, one to look out for in the next few weeks. Very nice setting here at this junction in Treswell Wood. Treswell's a large wood just outside the town of Retford. Nice place to come. A nice evening for trapping. And as you can hear, the muntjac has started calling once again. Very unnerving sound if you didn't know what it was. One of many sounds that you get in woodlands after dark. Never let your mind overrun you and get ahead of you. It's an unearthly call, muntjac. Well, we've just gone past 10:30 and not even on 30 species yet. It's been very, very quiet, and so there's not even any diptera flying really, very small numbers of flies. There's a few caddis flies turning up, and we've got a few moths, but this is the rarest of the ones we have this evening. I don't think I've ever trapped this, and it's a pinion streaked snout. It won't hold still, so it will be a photograph time. I'll insert a photograph in, and I am going to take this back and try and photograph it. But it's an uncommon moth in the county, although in recent years there's been a few more records, and it seems to occur at light traps in a line from sort of Nottingham itself, from sort of Wollerton area and right through into the northeast. It's pretty much a moth generally of wet areas, and there are wet areas in Treswell Wood. There's certainly 1 or 2 largish ponds, but this is quite a surprise. So that's a nice one to get, pinion streaked snout. That's by far the most uncommon or rarest moth that I've got this evening. A few hornets continue to come in, but on the whole generally very quiet, but a very pleasant night and no rain, thankfully. Well, here's a very big surprise. I certainly wasn't expecting this species in the middle of Treswell Wood, well away from its typical habitat of heathland. This is a heath rustic. It had me confused at first, and I must admit I thought it was a well-marked white-line dot when I initially saw it, but then something just didn't ring right, and I had to refer to the book, and it is indeed a heath rustic. The first time that I've ever trapped the moth of this species, seen the larva and found the larva a couple of times by either beating heather or sweep netting heather. So this is a really good record. It's going to be a first record for Treswell, and a really nice one for me too. A great surprise to find this heathland species tucked away in the middle of Treswell Wood, but it is prone to wandering and will sometimes even turn up in gardens, but a nice one to get. Now, it's a fairly common pyrrhid that will occur in most people's gardens. I get this at home, not regular, I must admit, and not in any numbers, usually ones and twos a year, but this is Eusophera pinguis, which is a very easy to identify pyrrhid. There's a number of pyrrhids, this general shape, but this is the only one that you're likely to get that shows this coloration. Quite a dull background colour, but that sort of white zigzag pattern against a dark background at the base of the forewings is a distinctive giveaway. But it is a very attractively marked moth, and say one easily recognised. So it is an easy pyrrhid. If you're going to get into your micro moths, start with the pyrrhids, because they offer a good opportunity to be able to identify a number of species. But Eusophera pinguis, nice moth. Well, here's a nice little selection of moths, fairly typical to what most of you will be catching if you're running the trap now. The lower left there is Potania ruralis, otherwise known as mother of pearl, and very appropriately named too. Next to that we have a dusky thorn with that typical thorn rested posture, and a centre barred sallow directly above the dusky thorn. And to add a bit of colour, two beautiful brimstones on the right of the box. One thing about trapping in autumn, as I've mentioned before, there are a colourful range of moths, most of which are fairly common, so you'll trap them quite readily. Even though there's not the number of moths about in autumn compared to the height and peak season of the summer, it's well worth trapping. Always worth running the trap in my mind, except if you're in a suburban or an urban garden. I wouldn't bother running the trap much after October. Certainly you're unlikely to get many species unless you've got some habitat close by, some woodland habitat. Trapping from home during the colder months of the year is rarely worth the effort. If you want to do that, do as I do and get out to your local woodland. But a nice selection of moths that are around at the end of August and at the start of September. Well, it's 23:30, and even in these conditions I'm going to pack up after 3 hours. I've enjoyed the session that I've had here, but it has been very disappointing. I was expecting more species, and yes, I could stay another hour or 2 hours and get a few more species, but at the same time I'm going to collect even more hornets than over 20 that I have in the boot of the car, and then there's one or two around the light at this moment as we speak. But there's just not the moths around, something that I knew, but I was still expecting more species than I've had. But it will be nice to come back to Treswell Wood in a few weeks' time when autumn is really underway, and hopefully there won't be so many hornets.